Some new job listings with the Nintendo-related company have people thinking that this is more proof of more Legend of Zelda games coming to the Nintendo Switch very soon, and I might be inclined to agree with them. And Nintendo President Furukawa speaks about the future of the Nintendo Switch and teases some very big things, but what could they be? What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and be sure to like the video because I'm supposed to be doing my taxes right now, but instead I'm making a video for you. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. So The Legend of Zelda is of course celebrating its 35th anniversary this year, and many people think that this is going to be a big year for Zelda games and the Nintendo Switch in general. Of course, we saw a large celebration for Super Mario's 35th anniversary, with new games, even new hardware revisions that just recently came out. Make sure you guys check out my red Nintendo Switch unboxing video because I'm an idiot and don't know how Joy-Con straps work, and a lot of people like to make fun of me about that. We of course got Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and Bowser's Fury was absolutely amazing. So there's a lot of things that happen with Mario and its 35th anniversary. And Zelda is just as important, if not more important, on Nintendo platforms than Mario games are, at least in Nintendo's eyes. When you look at the history of games that have gotten compilations for The Legend of Zelda, like remember the GameCube? You had the Ocarina of Time plus the Master Quest stuff for Zelda's anniversary, yet the GameCube didn't have any sort of Mario celebration or Mario compilation on it. And of course, there's been Zelda-related systems, Zelda-related handhelds, all sorts of stuff when it comes to the Legend of Zelda universe. Now, recently, we of course talked about some new patents being renewed with two games in mind, the Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass. And I thought that was interesting because of the fact that those two games sort of play into each other. The Phantom Hourglass storyline is pretty much within the Wind Waker universe, which, if you want to break it down, there's so many, multiple timelines in the Hyrule universe. I don't know how the hell, people keep up with that stuff and try to, break it down because it's just ridiculous. And, one day you're going to have, future Sonic meet past Sonic with future Link meeting past Link and all sorts of stuff. I don't know. It absolutely blows my mind. But since then, we've had more Legend of Zelda game patents get renewed, including Skyward Sword. Now, Skyward Sword would be awesome on the Nintendo Switch because I never completed Skyward Sword. It is the one mainline Legend of Zelda game I have never completed because I just didn't like those controls. The controls were fine for a little while, but always having to move your arm around and stuff, I like to play the Legend of Zelda games in huge chunks, 6 to 8 hour chunks, and it just got kind of tiring doing that. But really, we're not here to talk about patent renewals, although they are very interesting, because now something else is being somewhat parlayed into this. And at first, I didn't really think much of it because of the company involved, but then I realized this company has a lot of history with the Legend of Zelda, and that is the company known as Grezzo. Now, Grezzo, of course, recently did the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch, a very, very good game, a solid 8 out of 10. Those little performance issues, though, they did kind of bother me more so than I would like to admit, but still, it was a classic game that was brought over to a modern platform, and I definitely did appreciate that, as the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening was actually my introduction into the Zelda franchise back on the Game Boy. And of course, Grezzo also did Beyond Oasis on the Nintendo 3DS, which sold I don't know, 7 copies or something like that. It came out in 2017. Nobody was buying 3DS games at that time, and that game definitely suffered because of it. Well, Grezzo recently put up 2 job listings on their website, and at first I was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool. One of the job listings is for a programmer who has to use things like Unity, Visual Studio, so on and so forth. Grezzo is looking for someone with experience in Unity and someone who likes games and can create great things with a player mindset. Also, there are some other job listings. One is for an effects designer and one is for a UI designer. Now, the approach to the game's design will be medieval and stylish. It's not a photorealistic game, but takes elements from reality and puts a design twist on them. The UI designer is going to be doing things like HUDs, menus, and so on and so forth. So initially, I kind of just thought, oh, Grezzo is just working on another game. Maybe they're doing a new IP, maybe even they're doing something with the Beyond Oasis IP, maybe trying to bring it over to the Nintendo Switch to sort of recoup some of that money. But this was just sort of my ignorance with this subject, because when I think of Grezzo, I don't necessarily think of the Legend of Zelda games, but when you look at how many Legend of Zelda games Grezzo has done, the script completely changes, because they have done games like, of course, Link's Awakening that we just talked about, but they also did Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, Triforce Heroes, and Four Swords Adventures for the Nintendo 3DS. So, they have experience with upscaling these older Nintendo games in the Legend of Zelda franchise and bringing them them to a more modern platform. Like, yes, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time wasn't an HD experience on the Nintendo 3DS, but you had things like improved visuals, you had things like improved controls, improved camera as well. So they did a lot of things with that game, aside from just the fact that they made it 3D as well, to make this game stick out. So if you've done games like the Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D, and you've also done offset games like Triforce Heroes, like, they're deep rooted in The Legend of Zelda. And that was really just my ignorance towards the subject. And maybe there's a lot of people that are also like me and don't realize just how many Legend of Zelda games that Grezzo has worked on. I would be completely cool if they put, you know, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask in like a 2-pack or a 3-pack, throw in another game like Wind Waker into it, and they just use the 3DS game as the base model and just improve the textures and visuals and stuff like that and put it on the Nintendo Switch. You know, if it was its own sort of game, maybe that wouldn't be quite enough, but if you're doing it in a compilation, I think that's more than enough. So this situation has gotten a lot more interesting. I'm not 100% that this is what Grezzo is working on, simply because of the timing of it. You know, if they're looking for things like UI designers and things like that, you would think that if it's a game scheduled to come out in 2021, they would already have these things sort of done for this game, or at least further along. Maybe this is just to sort of assist with these things or something like that, but it's definitely very interesting. I'm about 85% sure, you get it, RGT85, that this could be potentially Zelda related stuff. And if it is, I think it's in good hands. You know, I loved Ocarina of Time 3DS on the Nintendo 3DS. Fantastic game. So bring it on, Grezzo. What are you working on? Start talking about it, because people are hungry for information. And finally, when you compare figureheads of companies to Nintendo, it's pretty much a different situation. You of course have Phil Spencer with Microsoft, who's very outspoken and boisterous. Same thing with Jim Ryan over at Sony. But with Nintendo, you never really hear all that much stuff. Doug Bowser never talks about anything, and really Nintendo of America is more so just a marketing company. When it comes down to things, Nintendo of Japan is the main company, and President Furukawa just doesn't really talk all that much. Well, a recent interview actually just took place with President Furukawa with Neki, which is a Japanese publication. I like saying their names because it kind of sounds like Neki, 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 Neki. Now, this interview was translated by our friends over at Nintendo Everything's website. I use the term friends loosely because, I don't know, a lot of websites don't like me. A lot of people in general don't like me, which I don't really get. But if you like me, be sure to like this video. But they did ask that if anyone covered this topic, as they were the ones who got this translation, to give them full credit. And I play by the rules most of the time. I am a good person. So to read the full interview with President Furukawa that was translated by Nintendo Everything, there is a link to it in the description box down below. But there was definitely some very interesting things that were discussed when it comes to the Nintendo Switch and sort of where it is in its life cycle right now that I definitely want to talk about. So President Furukawa said the following about the Nintendo Switch. As the Switch enters its 5th year on the market, one of our focal points is ensuring it has a long life cycle. It is very important for us that customers continue to enjoy playing their Switch. This includes Switch owners who bought the console at launch all the way up to those who bought in with recent releases like Animal Crossing. It's about providing new gameplay experiences for all Switch owners. We need to keep in mind that the console base will continue to expand, as well as the types of games that have already been released for the system. So then Neki essentially just pressed the situation, something that I think a lot of us are curious about, and that is, what are the steps to extend the hardware's life cycle if you're only at the midway point? To which President Furukawa said the following: right, I always say that the Nintendo Switch is around the middle stage of its life cycle. We're able to offer a wide variety of different games because the Nintendo Switch is both a home and portable console, but there's so much more that can still be done in the coming years. So right then and there, my eyes got all big and bushy, because obviously if you're going to extend the hardware life cycle, if you are hell-bent on saying that the Nintendo Switch is in the middle of its life cycle, there has to be something, at least in my opinion, more than just simply software. And yes, software does drive system sales. You can look at the software sales for the Nintendo Switch and it's absolutely astronomical, but you do have to realize that at some point in time you do reach a technical limit with games, especially on the Nintendo Switch. Let's look at the most recent game game that came out, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Now, Bowser's Fury's portion of the game was absolutely breathtaking, but there was a key difference that a lot of people noticed. When the game is in dock mode, it is at 60 frames per second, but when you play Bowser's Fury in handheld mode, it's only 30 frames per second, which I didn't initially realize because I actually played Bowser's Fury completely in dock mode. But a lot of people were questioning, well, why was that? And I think the answer is simple. The Nintendo Switch is reaching its hardware limits on this. When you look at something like Bowser's Fury, there's so many dynamic environmental things going on with things like lighting, things like water effects, things like Bowser's Fury in general that actually changes how the game it looks and changes environmental things that can be destroyed within the game. Plus, it is a huge open area with no loading time aside from the initial loading time. So if you were to put this on the standard Nintendo Switch model at 60 frames per second, the battery life would be piss poor on it. Your battery would get eaten alive on it, and that's probably why they did the 30 frames per second. That's why you see downgrades, because it's not just necessarily technical limits in terms of the game's visuals, but you have to factor in things like battery life. So if you want to do something to extend the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, like how the hell is it not a Nintendo Switch revision of some sort? I am not saying that this would be a successor to the current Nintendo Switch model, but this would simply be a beefed up model like we've talked about a million times on this channel. I didn't want to use Switch Pro or Switch Revision in the title because I know people are sick of it, but it just makes perfect sense here. Nintendo wants to extend this system's life cycle. Typically, Nintendo system life cycles are like 5 to 6 years, but if you're only at the halfway point and you want to extend it and you're already hitting technical limits with the hardware that you have right now, why wouldn't you do a revision? Something that's a bit stronger, that gives developers a bit more wiggle room to play with, and of course allows you to have things like better battery life, better visuals, but still plays the standard Nintendo Switch games just a bit better. So I don't know. Obviously the Nintendo Switch has a very bright future, but I think the future would be brighter with an option, a simple option for people who want things like better graphics, better performance, better battery life, a premium system. I think it would sell very well for Nintendo. I think that they are sort of underestimating this, maybe because the new 3DS didn't sell all that great comparatively to the other 3DS, but the new 3DS was definitely an upgrade. So Nintendo has done things like this with their handhelds a million times. The DS, the DSi, the DS Lite, the 3DS, the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL. So why not expand into this with the home console market? I mean, you did do the expansion pack on the N64. Why? To run more higher quality games on the system that needed that additional boost. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see the future of Nintendo, and I definitely am leading to believe that there's going to be some sort of revision just based on these words. You have much more to do within the next coming years. You're only at the halfway point of your system's life cycle. What else can you really do? Alright, so this video went on way longer than I anticipated it to. I guess I just had a lot to say about these two topics, so let me know in the comments section down below what you think of all this. What is Grezzo working on? Is it a Legend of Zelda game? And will it be coming out this year? And is it a classic Zelda game? Maybe an offshoot Zelda game? Because really, they have all that under their pedigree. And President Furukawa, how are you going to extend the Nintendo Switch's life cycle when you're talking about the future of this system? I'll let you guys sort of speculate in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. No, I am not wearing the same thing in every video. A lot of people are starting to say that. Like, I just have a lot of white t-shirts. This is actually not a standard white tee. It's a Sony white tee. It is cold out, so I wear a hoodie, and I have a new Knicks hat, so I like to wear it because the Knicks are balling right now. Did you see that game last night? We beat the piss out of Houston. D-Rose, baby. D-Rose is back in the garden. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.